I'm Drew Conroy,
Tim Huppe.
and we are here today to share with you techniques in training steers and oxen. Tim is a longtime 4-H leader in New Hampshire. Tim and I were both in the New Hampshire 4-H working steer program in the 1970s. We've had a lot of experience and a lot of fun training steers and oxen over the years.
Drew has been a great asset to our whole program here in New England. He's a professor of animal science at the University of New Hampshire's Thompson School. Now has his doctorate, has done extensive research and work in Africa. We'd like to welcome you all here to Berrybrook Farm today.
Before we actually get out with any steers or calves and show you our training techniques, I think it's important to share with you a little bit of background, a little bit of our philosophy in training animals. I think oxen can be trained at any age. I've worked overseas where they don't start training cattle until they're 3 or 4 years old. However, here in New England, we have a long-standing tradition of training animals as calves. It's something that's been done in New England by children for hundreds of years. Tim's got 4 daughters, and Tim, your daughters have trained many pairs of steers and oxen. I think part of the reason we like to work with steers and oxen is the safety of it. Working with calves is very easy. It's easy on the people, it's easy on the animals, and we are going to stair-step through on this videotape how to train calves using this New England tradition.
I think that probably what we should open up with, Drew, this morning is what's our first order of business when we go to pick a farm to find those cattle that we choose to use as bulls for oxen.
Right, and selecting calves is a very important part of the training process. You need to select calves that have the right conformation and the right temperament.
When we step onto a farm, one of the early things that we would want to achieve is to get a good feel for the farmer and his husbandry. Make sure that we find a farm that where his animals are kept healthy, where he's hopefully done a little bit of breeding that allows a nice, quiet animal, an intelligent animal, good conformation. I think the first thing that I try to tell my 4-H kids and finding that farm is build a relationship first with the farmer, choose the breed that they're looking for, and then start finding the information of what looks best in a calf.
In training animals, you need to take the time to work them. Calves are not going to train themselves. You have to put in the time and effort in training them. It doesn't take a lot of time and effort, but you have to dedicate a certain amount of time and effort to training. The other part of the training is you have to be consistent in the way you provide those commands. You're commanding oxen, you're not asking them. And you have to be consistent in the way that you work with those animals. You have to be patient. Cattle are very forgiving animals, but at the same time, if you're too hard on them, you ask too much, you're a little too rough, they do get scared. So you need to put in your time, you need to be very consistent with your commands. And the other thing that we think is important is you need to mix up their routine. Even though you have to be consistent with the way you provide the animals commands, the things you want the animals to do and ask them to do, you have to mix up the routine of work. Cattle are very, very happy to do the same thing every single day. And if you work them in the same place, you do the same exact routine every day, they're going to be very uncomfortable and even scared if you ask them to do something different.
One of the mistakes that can be made is to build a relationship that they're more like a pet. And that's all right in the barn, that's all right out of the yoke, but when you have them in the yoke, it should be all about business. You must congratulate them for a job well done. However, you have to be clear and distinct with your signals. Your training, as Drew said, has to be slow and consistent. One of the things that we looked at when we buy a pair of calves, put a halter on them, take them for a walk. Be very comfortable with what you're doing. Don't push it. Do that for a few sessions and then move on.
And while we emphasize some of our 4-H background, Tim and I have trained many pairs of cattle ourselves for pulling contests, for farm work and logging. And cattle can be used for anything. You can use them for pretty much anything a horse can be used for. We don't typically see people riding cattle because they're a lot slower and their gait isn't as nice, but they can be trained to do anything a horse can. They're slower, they don't work as fast in hot weather, but they're easy to work, they're easy to train, they're easy to put to work with their very simple equipment.
The multitasking that a pair of cattle allow you on a small farm, especially on our rocky New England farms, there's a variety of things that we can do with the cattle. Throw them out in the pasture. If you don't work them for 3 or 4 weeks, you don't have an animal that you've got to, get them back to quiet. They do it very well with great periods of time in between using them.
There are a couple of areas of training that we ought to discuss before we get the animals out. I think an important part of the training is goal setting. Whenever I work a pair of cattle, I don't care where those cattle are in the world, where they are in their stage of training. I quickly evaluate the animals to see where they're at in terms of what they understand or not. I also quickly set goals for what these cattle need to learn. So I think goal setting is an important part of training. If you're starting with young calves, the goal should be get them to follow you on a lead rope or halter. You know, quickly move into the yoke and some of the basic commands. If you've got a big pair of cattle, say like the two behind us, that are wild and not trained, the goal might be to capture the animals and do it easily, to get them used to just being tied up. And then at every stage, you need to continually set goals and sort of up the ante and work on what am I going to do next with this team? What am I going to train them to do next?
For a novice, be very careful not to get a team that is more than they can handle. Try to start with the younger calves. You won't lose your confidence. You won't have the complications that you would have with an older team that already has some ideas of their own. One of the things that if we bring a pair of calves home, we make it very comfortable with the surroundings. And the first thing when we teach it to lead, I want them to lead well with a halter, not with a neck strap. The reason I say that, I want complete control over the animal. It's very important that as we train these animals, we never lose that complete control.
Exactly.
Because if we do that, then we've lost ground and that training session is of very little value. So when we're talking setting goals, the first thing that we do when we bring our calves home is day or two old. Bring them right out into the dooryard, doesn't matter what the season is, and put a halter on them, and might take one person pushing them a little bit from behind, but we get them going forward with a halter on them.
The other part of this training that's important is how long should you work with the animals? The bigger cattle, they can work all day, and in fact years ago, I mean, cattle would work 12, 15-hour days. The little calves that we're going to show you, and we've got animals ranging in age from a few months to a year, they can't take a day like that. So the training needs to be shorter. And Tim, you've...
Short and crisp. I think with the 3 or 4 month old calves or younger and even a little older, you'd want to go out and make your goals that day very clear and defined. And as you set out, I wouldn't go out on a pair of 4 month old calves. You don't need much more than an hour session, maybe an hour and a half, but you'd have to keep it fairly simple. The thing to stay away from is to go out in the middle of that dooryard and do turns for an hour and a half. Take a walk, make sure they travel well together. Your goal should be that your team is acting well together in a yoke. Work on a few G's and ha's and your backing. Keep it simple. I think that one of the things that we'll say throughout this day is many times is to keep it simple. And I also just like to tell people don't do this when you're tired and short of patience. The experience is bad for both.
Playing off that, Tim, I mean, I think that's a wonderful rule to follow. And at the same regard, when I work the young cattle, you work them too long and they get tired. The other part of it is I like to have a short session. You said short and crisp. And what I think that means is when I finish with a 1 hour session or a half-hour session or an hour and a half session with my young calves, I finish on a positive note. I finish when they have done exactly what I wanted, because if you put them away when they have misbehaved, you have trained those animals, or you're beginning to train those animals to misbehave. If I run away, if I twist around in the yoke, if I fall down, they unyoke me. And cattle are so quick to pick up on how to get out of work. They're not very bright, but somehow they figure out very quickly. If you ever train older cattle, and we've both trained cattle that have some years under them, that's one of the toughest things with the older animals, is to teach them that respect and dominance. You're the dominant ox, and they're going to follow you.